My name is Eleanor Wright. I'm 32 years old. And I didn't leave my 5-year relationship because we had a fight. I left because in one single moment, the man I love screamed, "Get out!" And I finally understood that he meant my future, not just my body, needed to leave his life. It happened on a night that was supposed to be quiet, ordinary, forgettable. Instead, it became the night everything I thought we were building collapsed in on itself with one sentence. People love to talk about breakups like they're dramatic explosions, screaming matches, tears, thrown objects, final words shouted down hallways. That's not what this was. This was worse. This was a slow, ugly realization, wrapped in silence. We'd just come home from his younger sister's engagement party. She'd been with her boyfriend for 18 months, not even 2 years. And there they were, ring flashing under warm restaurant lights, everyone cheering, hugging, crying, happy tears. I clapped, I smiled, I meant it. On the drive home, the city lights blurred past the windshield, and the car felt too small for all the thoughts pressing against my chest. I didn't plan to say anything heavy. I really didn't. I just said softly, "They seem really happy." He nodded, eyes on the road. And then, before I could stop myself, I added, "It kind of made me think about us." Silence. Not comfortable silence, not thoughtful silence. The kind of silence that tightens your throat. "We've been together a long time," I continued carefully. "Longer than most of our friends who are married now. I think it might be time we talked about where we're going, our timeline, what we're building toward." His hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Can we not do this right now?" he said. "When would be a good time?" I asked. "Every time I bring up the future, you shut it down." "I don't want to talk about it," he snapped. "Why not?" My voice shook despite my best efforts. "After 5 years, don't you think I deserve to know where this is going?" That's when everything shifted. "I said I don't want to talk about it," he raised his voice. "God, why do you always have to push? Why can't you just be happy with what we have right now?" "Because what we have feels like it's standing still," I thought. But I didn't say that out loud. I said, "Because I don't want to wake up one day and realize I've been waiting for a future you never planned to give me." He pulled into our apartment complex and slammed the car into park so hard it made me flinch. "You want the truth?" he said. "Fine. I don't know if I want to marry you. I don't know if I want to marry anyone. And honestly, I'm exhausted by you making me feel like there's something wrong with me for not being ready." My chest burned. "Pressuring you?" I whispered. "I've asked about our future maybe 3 or 4 times in 5 years. That's not pressure." "Well, it feels like it," he said. "And I need space. I need you to stop making me feel like I'm failing some kind of relationship test." "I'm not testing you," I said. "I'm asking if you see a future with me." He got out of the car and slammed the door. I followed him inside, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. The apartment felt different the moment we stepped through the door. Smaller, colder, like it already knew what was coming. He turned on me. "You know what?" he said. "Maybe we need a break. Maybe you need to figure out why you're so obsessed with a piece of paper that doesn't even mean anything." "It means something to me," I said quietly. "Then maybe we want different things out of life." "Do we?" I asked. "Because I've been clear about what I want for years. You're the one who keeps avoiding this conversation." And that's when he exploded. "Get out!" The word hit me like a slap. "I can't do this right now," he continued. "I need you to leave. Go stay with your sister or a friend or whoever. I can't even look at you." I stood there. 5 years of shared space, shared routines, shared plans I thought were mutual, reduced to an order. "Okay," I said. He blinked. "What?" "Okay," I repeated. "I'll leave." There it was, the flicker of surprise on his face. Confusion. Because he didn't expect me to agree. He expected tears, begging, apologies, me shrinking myself down until my desire for a future seemed unreasonable again. I didn't give him that. I went to our bedroom and pulled my duffel bag out of the closet. He followed me, anger already fading into something closer to panic. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Leaving," I said, folding clothes with steady hands. "Like you asked." "I didn't mean forever," he said quickly. "I just meant for tonight, so we can cool off." "I know what you meant," I said, "but I'm done." "Done?" he scoffed. "You're breaking up with me over one argument?" "No," I said, finally turning to look at him. "I'm breaking up with you because after 5 years, you can't have a basic conversation about our future without telling me to get out." "That's not one argument," I added. "That's a pattern." He didn't have an answer for that. By the time I zipped the bag, he was crying. I watched him carefully, trying to decide if the tears were real. After 5 years, I still couldn't tell. And that told me everything I needed to know. Before I left, I walked to the kitchen. I opened the drawer where I'd been hiding something for months. A small white box. I placed it on the counter. Next to it, I left a note. 2 words. Dodged a bullet. Then I walked out and didn't look back. That was the night my life split in two. And I didn't know it yet, but his panic hadn't even started. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my sister's couch, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun slow, uneven circles, the sound slicing through the quiet like a metronome counting down something I couldn't name yet. My phone buzzed constantly on the coffee table. Calls, missed calls, voicemails I didn't open. At some point near dawn, the screen finally went dark, and the silence felt louder than the noise ever had. That's when the memories started coming in waves. Not the dramatic ones, the small ones. We met 5 years ago at a mutual friend's wedding. I remember that clearly. He'd been standing near the bar, tie loosened, laughing too loudly at something someone said. I remember thinking he looked comfortable in a room full of people, like he belonged anywhere he stood. We talked for hours that night. Nothing earth-shattering, just easy, familiar. Like we'd skipped the awkward beginning and landed somewhere solid right away. We started dating a week later, moved in together after 2 years, shared an apartment, a couch worn into the shape of our bodies, a Netflix account that somehow knew our moods better than we did. From the outside, we looked stable, and for a long time, I believed that was enough. I work as a project coordinator for a mid-sized development firm. It's not glamorous, but it's steady. I like systems, timelines, knowing where things are headed and what it takes to get there. I've always been responsible with money. I started saving for a house down payment 3 years into our relationship, not because he asked, because I believed we were building towards something together. And about 8 months ago, I started saving for something else. Something I never told him about. The ring. It sounds strange, even now, saying that out loud as a woman. But it wasn't impulsive. It wasn't a power move or a test. It was practical, thoughtful, me. He wasn't the type to plan surprises. He got overwhelmed by big gestures. I knew that about him. So I decided, quietly, that when the time felt right, I would ask. Not publicly, not extravagantly, just honestly. I saved every extra dollar, skipped trips, cut back on little indulgences. The ring cost $6,200. A princess-cut diamond set in a simple white gold band. Nothing flashy, because he always said he didn't like flashy things. I asked his friends subtle questions, looked at the pieces he lingered on when we walked past jewelry stores, paid attention. I thought that was what love was supposed to look like. Attentive, patient, intentional. But even then, there were signs. Little ones I brushed aside. Whenever marriage came up in group settings, friends talking about weddings, engagements, future plans, he'd make a joke. Sounds expensive. Couldn't be me. Or he'd suddenly need another drink. Change the subject. I told myself he was private. Not everyone likes discussing milestones publicly, right? I respected that. Or at least I told myself I did. Looking back, I see how often I made excuses for his silence. How I translated avoidance into complexity. How I convinced myself that loving someone meant waiting quietly while they figured themselves out, no matter how long that took. 5 years sounds like a long time when you say it out loud. But when you're living it day by day, it sneaks up on you. And a year becomes not yet. 2 years becomes soon. 5 years becomes the question you're no longer allowed to ask. That night at his sister's engagement party, watching everyone cheer for a future being celebrated openly, something inside me cracked. Not loudly. Just enough. I didn't want pressure. I didn't want ultimatums. I wanted clarity. And somehow, asking for clarity made me the enemy. By morning, I had listened to one voicemail. Just one. His voice was shaky, apologetic, confused. I didn't mean it like that, he said. You know I didn't mean for you to leave. We just needed space. Space. The word felt hollow now. Because what he'd really asked for was time without accountability. And I'd finally stopped offering it. I turned my phone face down. I didn't know what would happen next. I only knew one thing with terrifying certainty. If I went back now, nothing would ever change. I went back to the apartment on Saturday. Not to see him, to retrieve the pieces of my life I'd left behind. I timed it carefully. He'd texted earlier in the week saying he'd be out all afternoon. I didn't respond, but I memorized the window anyway. Walking up to the building felt surreal, like visiting a place I used to live in a dream. The hallway smelled the same, cleaner and old carpet. The elevator mirror still showed my reflection in a way that made me look smaller than I felt. When I unlocked the door, the apartment was silent. Too silent. The first thing I noticed was that nothing had moved. The couch pillows were exactly where I'd left them. My mug was still in the sink. The throw blanket draped over the armrest like it was waiting for me to sit back down and pretend none of this had happened. And there, on the kitchen counter, was the ring. still in its box, still sitting next to my note. Dodged a bullet. I stared at it longer than I meant to, not because I regretted leaving it, but because I finally understood what it represented. It wasn't just a proposal. It was 5 years of patience, of hoping, of swallowing my own needs so he wouldn't feel pressured. It was proof that I'd been planning a future with someone who couldn't even stand to talk about one. I packed quietly. Clothes, shoes, books I loved more than I realized. Small things that carried weight when lifted one by one. Halfway through, my phone buzzed. A text. "What is that ring? Is that real? Were you actually going to propose to me?" 3 messages sent minutes apart. I didn't reply. What was there to say? Yes, I was planning to ask you to commit to a future you openly told me you didn't know if you wanted. That wasn't a conversation worth having anymore. As I moved through the apartment, memories tried to ambush me. The spot on the floor where we danced drunk after a wedding. The counter where he used to sit and talk while I cooked. The bedroom where we'd whispered plans late at night, plans that always stayed vague when it came to anything permanent. At the time, I thought we were being flexible. Now I saw it for what it was. Avoidance dressed up as patience. I found the sock drawer where I'd hidden the ring all those months. Empty now. I felt a strange sense of relief, like I'd reclaimed something that never should have been waiting there in the first place. That afternoon, I took my things to my brother's house. He didn't ask many questions, just handed me a spare key and told me to take the guest room as long as I needed. Later, over takeout, I finally told him everything. The engagement party, the drive home, the screaming, the order to leave. He listened without interrupting. Then he said something that stuck with me. "I always hated the way he talked to you in front of people," he said, "like you were overreacting just for existing." I laughed softly, not because it was funny, because it was true, and I'd normalized it. Over the next few weeks, the messages kept coming. From him, from mutual friends, from people who suddenly had opinions about my relationship now that it was over. "He's devastated. You blindsided him. 5 years is a long time to throw away over one argument." I didn't respond, because it wasn't one argument. It was years of unanswered questions. 3 months passed. I moved into my own apartment. Smaller, quieter, mine. The ring stayed in a drawer at my brother's house. I didn't know what to do with it yet. Sell it, return it, let it sit there as a reminder of what waiting too long costs. I figured I'd decide eventually. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have predicted, was that my silence wasn't bringing him peace. It was driving him toward panic. And soon, he was going to find out that I hadn't just moved on. I'd moved forward. I didn't go looking for love. That part matters. I wasn't scrolling dating apps at midnight, trying to prove a point. I wasn't posting thirst traps or carefully curated "I'm thriving" photos to get his attention. I was rebuilding my life quietly, learning the rhythm of my own apartment, drinking coffee on my balcony in the mornings, letting the silence feel like peace instead of loneliness. And then, 6 weeks after the breakup, Daniel messaged me. We'd known each other in college. Not intimately, not dramatically, just enough to remember how easy conversation had been. He said he'd seen my relationship status change and wanted to check in. No expectations, no pressure. We met for coffee. 3 hours later, the barista had asked us twice if we wanted refills. It was different from the beginning. Not fireworks. Clarity. He asked questions and actually waited for the answers. He didn't deflect when I talked about my past. He didn't joke it away or change the subject when conversations edged toward the future. On our 3rd date, he said casually, "I'm not dating for fun. I want a partner, eventually a family. If that's not what you want, that's okay, but I don't want to pretend." I remember staring at him, stunned. Not because he was proposing, but because he wasn't afraid to say the word eventually out loud. We took things slowly, even though everything felt easy. 2 months later, we were spending most weekends together. I told him about the ring, the one I'd bought, the one I never used. He didn't flinch. He didn't feel threatened. He just said, "That tells me how seriously you take commitment." A week later, at a small dinner with just the 2 of us, he asked me to marry him. No speeches, no audience, just honesty. I said yes before he finished asking. I didn't post the announcement right away. We took a few days just for ourselves. But when I finally shared it online, I didn't think about who might see it. I should have. Within hours, my phone started lighting up. Messages from people I hadn't spoken to in months. And then, a text from him. "Are you serious right now? You're engaged after 3 months?" I didn't reply. Then came messages from his friends. "This is cruel. You're clearly doing this to hurt him. He found the ring. He knows you were going to propose to him." The implication was clear. I was the villain now. What they didn't know was that I hadn't given Daniel that ring. I'd bought him his own. Different stone, different style. A clean beginning. The old ring stayed in a drawer, untouched. The calls escalated. From his number, unknown numbers, mutual friends playing messenger. He told people I'd blindsided him, that he didn't know things were that serious, that I'd thrown away 5 years over one argument. Funny how quickly history can be rewritten when panic sets in. I still didn't respond. I was happy, genuinely, and I wasn't willing to shrink that happiness to make someone else feel better about losing control. What I didn't realize was that he wasn't done trying to reach me. Not even close. The first time he showed up, I wasn't there. I found out later, from my sister-in-law. She called me mid-morning, her voice tight. "Your ex just came by the house," she said. "He was ringing the doorbell like something was wrong." My stomach dropped. I hadn't lived there for over a month. "He kept asking where you were," she continued. "I told him you didn't live here anymore. He asked for your new address." "And?" I asked. I told him it wasn't my place to share that. There was a pause. "Then he got angry," she said. "Like, uncomfortably angry. He accused me of hiding you, used the word harboring." Harboring. Like I was something stolen, or dangerous, or still his. She told him to leave, or she'd call the police. He eventually did, but not before saying, "I'll find her eventually." That sentence sat heavy in my chest for the rest of the day. The next time he found me, not at my apartment, at a restaurant, I was having dinner with Daniel and 2 friends from college. Laughing, relaxed, the kind of normal evening that had felt impossible just months earlier. I noticed the shift in the room before I saw him. That subtle hush, heads turning, the feeling that something had entered the space that didn't belong. Then I saw him, standing near the entrance, eyes already locked on me. He walked straight toward our table. "So this is her," he said, stopping just short of us. "This is the woman you threw 5 years away for." I stood up immediately. "You need to leave," I said. "I need answers," he snapped. "I need to understand how you could move on this fast." "I didn't cheat," I said evenly, "if that's what you're implying." "Then what is this?" he demanded. 3 months and you're engaged? That's not normal." Daniel stayed seated, calm but alert. "I think you should go," he said. "This isn't appropriate." My ex turned toward him like he'd been insulted. "I'm talking to my girlfriend." "Ex-girlfriend," I corrected. "As of 3 months ago, when you told me to get out for asking about marriage." "I didn't scream," he said quickly. "I was upset. There's a difference." "You told me to leave," I said. "I left. I don't know what else you expected." "I expected you to come back," he shot back. "I expected you to cool off and realize you overreacted." "And apologize," I added. He didn't deny it. The restaurant was watching now. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. "You ran off and proposed to the first man who showed you attention," my ex continued. "This is a rebound. You're going to regret it." I looked at him and felt something unexpected. Nothing. No anger, no guilt. Just distance. "The man you dated waited 5 years for you to decide if you wanted a future," I said quietly. "That man doesn't exist anymore." He stared at me like I'd hit him. Then he laughed. A sharp, hollow sound. "You've changed," he said. "You're cold now." "No," I said. "I'm done." He left after that, but not before turning to our friends and saying I was emotionally abusive and that Daniel should be careful. Daniel reached for my hand under the table. "I trust you," he said softly, "and that behavior told me everything I need to know." I wanted to believe it was over. It wasn't. After the restaurant incident, something in him shifted. It wasn't grief anymore. It was strategy. The messages stopped coming directly to me. Instead, they started landing everywhere else. My mother called first. Her voice was hesitant, careful, like she was stepping into a room where something fragile might shatter. "He called me," she said. "He was crying, said he didn't understand what happened, that you just left." I closed my eyes. "He told me," she continued, "that he never knew things were that serious, that you never actually proposed, that you just left a ring on the counter and walked out without trying to talk." "That part is technically true," I said, "because he screamed at me to get out when I tried to talk." There was a long pause. Then my mom sighed. "He said you were pressuring him constantly." "Mom," I said quietly, "I asked about our future after 5 years together." Silence. Then, "That's not pressure." No, it wasn't. It was adult communication. He didn't stop with my parents. He reached out to my brother again, a cousin I barely speak to. Even my grandmother, who is 72 years old and still believes relationships should be built on patience and respect. He told each of them a version of the story where he was confused, blindsided, abandoned, where I was impulsive, emotional, unreasonable. Watching someone rewrite history in real time is a strange thing, especially when you lived every moment they're now denying. Then he found Daniel. Not in person. Online. He sent him a long message, paragraphs carefully written to sound concerned, reasonable, almost kind. I think you deserve to know who you're getting involved with. She makes big life decisions without discussing them. She leaves the second things get hard. She did the same thing to me. Daniel showed it to me without hesitation. We read it together. Then we laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so transparently desperate. She asked me about marriage for 5 years, I said. I avoided it. But now she's impulsive? Daniel blocked him. I followed suit, or at least I tried. The next escalation came where I didn't expect it. My workplace. He called the main office and asked to speak with me about a personal legal matter. When the receptionist told him I was unavailable, he left a message implying we had shared assets and unresolved financial issues. We didn't. Our lease had always been in his name. Our finances were completely separate. I owed him nothing. But suddenly, HR was calling me into a meeting. I had to explain carefully that I was being harassed by an ex who refused to accept the end of our relationship. They were understanding, but embarrassed and exhausted, just like me. I still didn't respond to him, because responding would give him what he wanted. Engagement. Proof that he still mattered enough to disrupt my life. But silence doesn't always calm people. Sometimes it makes them louder, more reckless. And soon I was going to find out just how far he was willing to go to make himself the victim. The invitation wasn't sent to me. That was the first red flag. He called it a casual get-together. A few drinks, some familiar faces, nothing serious. But one of the people he invited was still more loyal to me than to him. And that's how I found out. My phone buzzed around 6 that evening. A text from Mark, one of our mutual friends, the kind who listens more than he talks. Hey, just a heads up. He invited a bunch of us over tonight. Pretty sure he's trying to get everyone officially on his side. Thought you should know. I stared at the message for a long moment. I wasn't angry. I wasn't scared. I was tired. Let him talk, I replied. The truth has a way of showing up. I didn't realize how quickly it would. According to Mark, the night was less get-together and more trial. He poured drinks, put on music, acted casual. Then, slowly, deliberately, he started telling his version of what happened. How I was emotionally unavailable. How I was obsessed with marriage to an unhealthy degree. How I abandoned him without warning. How I flaunted my new engagement to hurt him. And finally, his favorite piece of evidence, the ring. He showed them photos. The box on the counter. The note. Talked about how cruel it was, how traumatizing it had been to discover I'd been planning to propose while also walking out on him. What he didn't say, what he carefully avoided, was the part where he told me to leave. Mark waited. So did the others. Then he asked calmly, why did she leave that night? My ex shrugged. We had a disagreement about timing. She overreacted. Did you tell her to get out? Mark asked. There was a pause. Not seriously, my ex said. I was upset. That's when someone else spoke up. Lena, another friend, someone who'd known us both for years. Do you remember my birthday dinner last year? She asked the group. When someone asked you about marriage? My ex stiffened. You said, and I remember this clearly, I honestly don't know if I ever want to get married. I don't see the point of it. The room went quiet. My ex laughed nervously. I was joking. I was going through something. But the damage was already done. People started asking questions. Real ones. So why act blindsided? Why tell everyone she pressured you? Why scream at her to leave if you weren't serious? He didn't have answers. Just excuses. The gathering ended early. Not dramatically. Awkwardly. Mark texted me later with a full breakdown. I think he thought we'd all rally behind him. It kind of backfired. Most people left confused. One person even said maybe you were right to leave. I put my phone down and felt something loosen in my chest. Not victory. Relief. Because the truth no longer needed me to defend it. The next message from him came 3 days later. Not angry. Not accusing. Different. Long. Carefully written. He said he'd been thinking, reflecting, that he knew he'd handled things badly, that he hadn't meant for me to leave permanently. He blamed his fear of commitment, his parents' divorce, unresolved trauma. He said he was finally ready to talk, finally ready to try. He asked if there was any chance we could start over. I didn't respond right away, not because I was tempted, but because I wanted to choose my words carefully. Because some doors don't close on their own. You have to shut them. And I was finally ready to do that. I waited 2 days before replying. Not because I needed time to consider his offer. I knew my answer the moment I finished reading his message. But I needed time to decide how much of myself I was willing to give to a conversation that no longer belonged to my life. Because closure isn't something someone else gives you. It's something you choose. I reread his email once more before responding. The tone was softer, sadder, almost humble. He said he'd been afraid of commitment because of his parents' divorce, that watching their marriage fall apart had left scars he never dealt with properly. He said he'd been working through it internally, that he didn't mean for me to leave forever, that he was finally ready to have the honest conversation I'd been asking for, that he was willing to go to therapy, to work on his fears, to genuinely try. He asked if there was any chance we could start over. 5 years. It took 5 years and losing me for him to suddenly find clarity. I typed my response slowly, deliberately. I appreciate you sharing all of this with me. I understand you're hurting, and I understand that commitment can be genuinely scary. I paused, then continued. But you had 5 years to have this conversation with me honestly. Instead, you avoided it, deflected it, dismissed it, and when I finally asked directly, you screamed at me to leave. My hands were steady as I typed the next part. I can't build a future with someone who only wants to work on things after I've already walked away. I took a breath. I'm engaged now. I'm genuinely happy. I wish you well, but there's nothing to go back to between us. And finally, please stop contacting me, my family, and my fiancé. This is the last message I'll respond to. I hit send. Then I blocked him. Everywhere. His number, his email, every social media account I could find. When I put my phone down, I expected to feel something dramatic. Relief. Sadness. Triumph. What I felt instead was quiet. A deep, settled quiet. 5 days passed. Then 10. No calls, no messages, no indirect attempts through friends or family. The silence this time wasn't empty. It was peaceful. Daniel and I started wedding planning, not in a rush, but with excitement. My family adored him. His family welcomed me without hesitation. Everything felt aligned, in a way it never quite had before. The ring, the old one, was still in a drawer at my brother's house. I picked it up a week later and turned it over in my hand. 5 years of waiting. 8 months of saving. A future that never existed. I sold it the next day. The money went straight into our wedding fund. It felt like closing a loop. I'm not going to pretend the last few months weren't chaotic. They were exhausting, emotionally draining. Finding out your long-term relationship can implode over one honest conversation is jarring. Realizing how much you've been settling for is painful. Watching someone rewrite history to make themselves the victim is infuriating. But I learned something through all of it. When someone shows you who they are, especially when they're under pressure, believe them. The first time. He showed me for years that he couldn't talk about the future without shutting down or deflecting. I kept hoping he'd change. He didn't. And when I finally stopped waiting, he acted like I was the problem. I'm done with that. Some people will say I moved on too fast. Some will say leaving the ring was cruel. Some will say I should have given him more time to figure himself out. But I gave 5 years. That was more than enough. Sometimes the best revenge isn't spite. It's peace. It's strange how endings rarely feel like endings when you're inside them. There was no dramatic final confrontation after that email, no last voicemail, no unexpected knock at the door. Just quiet, the kind that lets you hear yourself think again. Daniel and I took our time after that, not because we were unsure, but because we finally could. We toured venues without rushing, argued playfully over flowers, laughed about seating charts like it was the most serious problem in the world. My family noticed the difference before I did. My sister told me one night, "You're lighter. You don't apologize before you speak anymore." She was right. I hadn't realized how often I'd been shrinking myself, softening sentences, cushioning opinions, bracing for irritation that never should have been there in the first place. Every once in a while, someone would bring him up, carefully, like his name was a fragile object that might shatter if said too loudly. "Have you heard anything? Is he doing okay? Do you ever wonder if—" I didn't. Not anymore. Because wondering implies unfinished business. And there wasn't any. The last tangible piece of that relationship, the ring, was gone now. Sold. Transformed from a symbol of waiting into something forward-facing. When I transferred the money into our wedding fund, I didn't feel bitter. I felt clean. Like I'd finally returned something that was never meant to stay with me. I don't hate him. That surprises people. They expect anger, or resentment, or at least a sharp edge to the way I talk about him. But hatred requires investment, and I've already invested enough. What I feel instead is clarity, and clarity has a way of stripping away illusion without cruelty. Here's what I know now. Someone doesn't have to be evil to be wrong for you. They don't have to cheat or lie or betray you in obvious ways. Sometimes they just don't want the same future. And instead of admitting that honestly, they keep you suspended, hoping you'll stop asking, waiting quietly. Forever if you let them. I asked one question in 5 years. Just one. And the answer I got wasn't confusion. It was anger. That told me everything. If there's a lesson here, if there has to be one, it's this. Don't confuse patience with love. Don't confuse silence with safety. And don't wait for someone to be ready when they benefit from you staying exactly where you are. Because when someone shows you who they are under pressure, believe them the first time,